Hey everyone, diving in today with you on a pretty somber note, actually.
Yeah.
It's about the plane crash that happened in Kazakhstan, on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Obviously a terrible tragedy. And we really want to kind of understand the impact, on the everyday people who are aboard this flight and those connected to them.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those situations that really pulls at the heartstrings. And we're looking at reports from various sources, Fox News, AP, Al Jazeera, each with their own kind of angle on what happened.
Right. Yeah. And so let's start with just the basic facts.
Yeah.
What do we know for sure?
Sure.
We know that Azerbaijan Airlines Flight J2-8243,
Uh-huh.
an Embraer 190, crashed near Aktau, Kazakhstan.
Right.
And it was originally supposed to be flying from Baku, Azerbaijan to Grozny, Russia.
Correct.
Um,
So tragically, there were 67 people on board.
yeah,
And it's easy to just see that as a number.
Right.
But we're talking about 42 Azerbaijani citizens, 16 Russians, 6 Kazakhs, and 3 Kyrgyz individuals,
Yeah.
each with their own stories, families waiting for them back home.
exactly. And I know that early reports were a bit chaotic
Yeah.
with kind of conflicting numbers about survivors.
Mm-hmm.
But it was later confirmed that 38 people unfortunately lost their lives.
Right.
And another 29 were hospitalized, many with serious injuries.
Yeah.
And it just makes you think about, the families that were anxiously awaiting news, clinging to hope.
Absolutely. In these situations, it's that human element that really resonates the most deeply.
Right.
And then, of course, the big question arises, why did this happen?
Right. The official explanation points to a bird strike causing an emergency.
Okay.
And they're saying that the plane had to divert to Aktau because of fog in Grozny.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
and this is where things get a little bit murky.
Yeah.
Flight data shows a significant deviation from the intended flight path.
Right.
The plane actually ended up far off course on the opposite side of the Caspian Sea. So that raises some eyebrows.
It does.
I'm also seeing reports mainly from Osprey Flight Solutions, which is a company that analyzes aviation data. Okay. And even some Ukrainian officials suggesting that the plane might have been shot down by a Russian air defense system.
Right.
Hmm.
It's important to emphasize that that is speculation at this point,
Right.
not confirmed information.
Of course.
However, you can't ignore the geopolitical context.
Right.
This region is experiencing heightened tensions, drone activity disrupting air travel,
Yeah.
and that backdrop naturally fuels speculation.
So we had these two contrasting narratives kind of emerging.
Mhm.
One blaming a tragic natural event, the other pointing to a potential act of aggression.
And in the middle of all this, you have families grieving,
Right.
survivors struggling to cope with the trauma,
Yeah.
entire communities reeling from the shock.
It's hard to fathom what those on board must have experienced, especially as details emerge.
Right.
There's footage showing the plane in a steep descent,
Oh, wow.
a fireball on impact,
Oh, gosh.
passengers desperately trying to escape the wreckage.
And then you see the ripple effect outwards.
Yeah.
The president of Azerbaijan cut his trip short,
Right.
declared a day of mourning, reflecting the collective grief of a nation.
It goes to show that something like this, even if it happens thousands of miles away, can touch us all.
It forces us to confront the fragility of life and the interconnectedness we share,
Yeah.
even with those we've never met.
Absolutely.
Amidst all the speculation and the geopolitical analysis, it's easy to lose sight of the individual stories at the heart of this tragedy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
We've talked about the numbers, we've talked about the possible causes, but what about the people whose lives were forever changed on that flight?
One detail that really struck me was a report of a young woman who was supposed to be on that flight, but overslept and missed it.
Wow, can you imagine that mix of emotions?
Yeah.
Relief to be alive,
Yeah.
but also survivor's guilt and the immense sorrow for those who weren't so fortunate.
It's a stark reminder of how these seemingly insignificant events can have life-altering consequences. And it highlights the randomness of life.
Yeah.
How we often take for granted the simple act of boarding a plane or saying goodbye to loved ones.
It's those everyday moments that suddenly become so precious
Yeah,
when something like this happens.
exactly. And it's not just the passengers and crew either. Think about the first responders who rushed to the scene.
Right.
The medical teams working tirelessly to save lives.
Yeah.
The air traffic controllers who had to witness this unfolding tragedy on their screens.
Those are the unsung heroes, right?
Absolutely.
The ones who grapple with the emotional toll long after the headlines fade.
You're right. Then you have the families of the victims grappling with unimaginable grief, the survivors dealing with physical and emotional trauma, and entire communities left reeling from the shock.
It makes you realize that the impact of an event like this extends far beyond the immediate crash site.
Think about the ripple effect on the families.
Right.
The parents who lost children, the children who lost parents.
Yeah.
The spouses left behind, the friendships shattered. The pain is immeasurable.
And for the survivors, that road to recovery is going to be long and arduous.
Absolutely.
They'll carry the physical and emotional scars of that day with them.
Yeah.
Some might never fly again.
But let's not forget the psychological impact on those who witnessed the crash. The people on the ground who saw the plane go down.
Yeah.
The first responders who had to deal with that immediate aftermath.
Right.
Those images can haunt you.
It's a collective trauma. A shared experience of grief and loss that can bind a community together,
Yeah.
but also leave deep wounds.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to remember the human cost of this tragedy. Beyond the statistics and the headlines, are real people with stories, dreams, and loved ones.
We need to shift our focus from the what and the why to the who.
Absolutely.
These weren't just passengers on a plane.
Right.
They were individuals, each with their own unique life story, now cut tragically short.
And by understanding that human impact, we can start to grapple with the true magnitude of this loss and offer support to those who are hurting. It's a reminder that empathy and compassion are essential,
Right.
especially in the face of such profound tragedy.
It's a powerful reminder that life is fragile and unpredictable. It compels us to cherish our loved ones, appreciate the simple things, and offer kindness wherever we can.
And that brings up another crucial point. The importance of reliable information in a situation like this, where emotions are running high and conflicting reports abound.
Right.
It's more important than ever to be discerning consumers of information.
Absolutely. Especially in the age of social media, where misinformation can spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
So how can we navigate this information overload and ensure that we're getting accurate, reliable information?
Well, first and foremost, diversify your news sources.
Okay.
Don't rely on just one outlet or perspective. Look for reporting from reputable organizations with a track record of accuracy and fairness.
So instead of just going with our usual news source, we should branch out and get different viewpoints.
Exactly. And pay attention to the language used.
Okay.
Are they stating facts or presenting opinions as facts? Are they using inflammatory language? Or sticking to neutral, objective reporting?
That's a good point. Sometimes a headline can be super sensationalized. But when you actually read the article, it's much more nuanced.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to be skeptical.
Oh.
If something sounds too good to be true or overly biased, it probably is. Do your own research, cross-reference information, and look for evidence to support the claims being made.
Like being a detective, right?
Yeah.
You have to gather clues from different sources and piece together the truth.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
And remember, critical thinking is key. Just because something is trending on social media or being repeated by a lot of people doesn't necessarily make it true.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the echo chamber.
Yeah.
Especially when emotions are running high.
Yeah.
So how can we avoid that?
Take a step back.
Yeah.
Question your assumptions. And be willing to consider different perspectives. Look for evidence-based reporting. Be wary of emotional appeals. And fact-check before sharing anything on social media.
These are great tips for anyone trying to navigate the often confusing world of news and information.
And in the case of this plane crash, where we're still awaiting the results of the investigation, it's even more crucial to be patient. Avoid jumping to conclusions and allow the facts to emerge.
This deep dive has been a somber one.
It has.
But it served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of informed critical thinking.
Indeed. To our listeners, we encourage you to keep seeking the truth. Honor the memory of those lost in this tragedy, and continue to navigate the complex world of information with a discerning and compassionate heart.
Yeah, it's a heavy truth for sure. And, you know, it kind of ties back to something we touched on earlier, those different theories about what caused the crash. On one hand, we've got that bird strike explanation, and on the other, this whole idea of a shoot down.
Right, and to understand that latter theory, it helps to know a little bit about how these air defense systems work.
Yeah, imagine like a very sophisticated radar constantly scanning the skies, looking for anything unusual.
Okay.
If it detects something that doesn't match known flight plans, it could trigger an automated response, launching missiles to intercept the perceived threat.
So in a highly tense area like this one, near the Caspian Sea, where drone activity has everyone on edge, could a misidentification happen? Could a civilian aircraft be mistaken for a hostile drone?
It's possible, though investigations would need to uncover specific evidence.
Right.
Think of it like this. If a bird strike truly disabled the plane's systems,
Yeah.
it might have veered off course in an unpredictable way, potentially triggering alarms in a nearby air defense system.
But wouldn't a bird strike be detected on radar, too?
Hmm,
Wouldn't that help differentiate it from a hostile aircraft or drone?
you'd think so, but it's not always that clear-cut.
Okay.
Bird strikes can happen very quickly, and depending on the size of the bird and the point of impact, they might not leave a distinct signature on radar.
Plus, in a chaotic situation, with fog potentially affecting visibility, separating a bird strike from other anomalies on radar could be extremely difficult.
So we're left with a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
And while investigators work to determine the cause of this tragedy,
Yeah,
it's understandable that speculation and anxieties would haunt high.
absolutely. And that's where critical thinking becomes so important. It's easy to get swept up in fear or anger, especially when presented with conflicting information.
Yeah.
But we have to resist the urge to jump to conclusions and instead focus on demanding thorough, transparent investigations.
So for those of us following this story,
Uh-huh.
what should we be looking for? What are the key pieces of evidence that could shed light on what truly happened?
Well, the black boxes, the flight data, and cockpit voice recorders will be crucial. They hold a wealth of information about the plane's performance,
Right.
any alarms that went off, and the crew's communication.
It's like a puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
And these recorders are some of the most important pieces.
Exactly. Beyond that, investigators will analyze radar data, satellite imagery, communication logs, weather reports, and even debris from the crash site,
Wow.
looking for any clues that could point to the cause.
It's a painstaking process, but it's the only way to get to the truth.
And while we wait for answers, it's important to remember the human cost of this tragedy.
Yeah.
Let's focus on honoring the memory of those who were lost, offering support to the families and survivors, and advocating for the thorough investigation they deserve.
Well said. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I hope our listeners walk away not only with a better understanding of the complex factors at play, but also with a renewed sense of empathy and a commitment to seeking truth in a world often clouded by uncertainty. Thanks for joining us.